No one's going to court. Okay, we don't have any kind of contract.
Hey,
speaking of court,
good point.
Yeah. Speaking of court,
I gotta work on that.
yeah. Speaking of court, just as a digression, your boy, I've been watching. I've been home for the last week, and of course, been following the Trumpster mania.
I'm tired of talking about Trump. Anyway.
Have you been watching it? It's getting really embroiled. There's a lot of stuff. It's deep. It's some deep stuff. Things missing, all kinds of things. Anyway, I want to read something to you, Rogan Smith. Excuse me, I didn't mean to do that. I'm trying to find this thing. Let me see if I can find this thing. Oh, Lord. I hate when I can't find an email. I had it just a couple of minutes ago. What are you... Oh, here it is. Here it is. I want to read this, if you don't mind. Do you mind?
What is it you're reading?
It's a letter to the editor.
You reading it in its entirety?
I won't read it in entirety. It reads fast. I got to find it, though. Hold on. Talk about some stuff while I find it.
Talk about some stuff. Let me read off from our sponsors that we don't...
Do that.
we haven't read off in a while.
Yeah.
Coca-Cola, Insurance Management, Burger King, KFC, Subway, John Bull Business Center. You got Kelly's, Arawak Homes for your own home, Sunshine Insurance. They've got 2 locations to serve you, Shirley Street and their newest location in Carmichael Road behind the walk-up Wendy's. Speaking of which, Wendy's, Bristol Wines and Spirits, Heineken, Superwash, Roman Meal Bread. And if you want to join this wonderful list of sponsors, you know how to reach us.
Yeah. And they have been very wonderful. We've been, next month in July.
Anniversary again.
Yeah. It's... I
Our
wonder how
sponsors have been really, really good to us, and we thank each and every one of them.
The big mystery is, how did we survive?
How did we survive?
Yeah, you and I.
You?
Yeah. And it's all on you. It has nothing to do with me. Listen, I want to read this letter. I'm going to do it fast as I can. You know Athena, of course.
Yes, Athena Damianos,
right?
Former Tribune editor.
Right. And she wrote a letter, and I thought, a lot of people are who they are. They're biased. They have biases toward you. They have biases toward me. That's just the way it is. People have their natural bias, right? And if we say something, they're going to take it in a certain way, no matter what it can be the truth. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's just that's the way it is.
Right.
Okay? And so sometimes when you get another perspective, and one person who I think people don't question in terms of her frankness is Athena, whether you like it or not.
No.
Whether you say again?
Anyway, go ahead.
No, but go ahead. No, tell me what you're saying.
You say one of the people who people don't question, but that's not.
I think
not accurate.
Well, maybe so, but I think that when she was writing, okay, she was equally as tough on both governments.
I would agree with that.
To the extent that people didn't. You can't say, well, she was rough. I mean, I think Mr. Ingram, for instance, and her had it out. I don't know if you remember that. Big time. So anyway, so I'm drawing on the fact that people see her as a person who I would say is going to call it like it is. From her perspective. Okay. So I'm going to read this letter really quick, and the head of it was, "It's hip to be negative."
Oh, I think I saw
that. Did you see that letter? Okay.
I didn't read the letter. I saw the headline.
Things are starting to move. Editor, things are starting to move. Crime is trending down, and the sick economy is showing some signs of recovery. We have a Whistleblowers Act and a Freedom of Information Act is slated to come into force within the next budgetary year. Plans are being shaped to reduce the level of plastic and promote healthy diet through breadbasket type breaks. Bids are to manage the public dump. A significant effort is being made to clean public spaces. A cleaner LNG energy initiative is planned for New Providence. The UK is to reopen a diplomatic post here. An ambitious program to give over-the-hill people an opportunity to share in the economy through tax breaks in exchange for promoting social development has been introduced. War has been waged on corruption. New laws are on the books to encourage foreign and local investment, with the New York-based GIBC Digital set to open in Freeport this month and treble its initial workforce. Affordable land is to be made available to Bahamians. A national neighborhood crime program has been launched. Panama's Copa Airline plans to increase flights to the Bahamas. Labor on the block's job fairs are producing results. The government has taken the painful but necessary step to right-size the civil servants. That takes guts. Who would have thought from the headlines and all the Debbie Downers that anything positive has happened?
Right.
It has become fashionable to be negative. Sure, we must hold our elected officials accountable and keep them in line. Absolutely. But at the same time, let's be big enough to give credit where credit is
Right.
due. Yet there have been some real boo-boos, and there will doubtlessly be more.
Yeah.
There's still a lot to do on various fronts. The children of the Bahamas, the children of Bahamian women must be afforded equal birth rights. The environment and fisheries industry must be protected. It takes time to lay a solid foundation for positive change. There's no magic wand solution. Only time will tell if the Minnis government stays the course and succeeds. In the meantime, it's good to see movement after so many years of inertia, arrogance, corruption, and squandering of tax dollars.
Yeah.
So
That was so on point. I'm in total agreement with her. And only is it fashionable to be negative, I feel like it's the easiest thing for people to say rather than to take the time to say, highlight all those positives and all those great things that have come as a result of the administration. You can certainly do, as she said, which is keep them accountable, hold their feet to the fire. But I think there needs to be balance in everything. That's the way it should operate, where you could say the good things that they've done, and as well as the things that they've
and by the
fallen
way,
short on.
if you want to add to the negative, and one of the things you can be negative about is to say, and they've done a very poor job of promoting it, the government.
Yeah, and
okay?
we've said that before on the show.
Right? So I think that, how do I say this? And I want people who are driving to hear what I'm saying. There's a requirement of hope. If you live in a barrel of gloom, it's going to be you know what it's like? It's a depressed state. You know, I remember when I would come to work every morning and I would stop by Chippingham Road to get my newspaper. There was someone, and I would just dread, because they don't do it anymore, but I would dread the headline because they were counting down the murders. And that puts a country in a state of depression. You mean every morning, that's what people were literally getting up to see that. You know, I'm not saying you don't report it.
No.
It's
what I was going to say, I'm not to cut you off, what I was going to say is I don't know that it put me in a state of depression. It just made me numb to it. I just became, you see it every day, it becomes so commonplace, you don't even give it a second thought
well,
anymore.
that's one of the things can happen. I just think it created just a gloom, this cloud, like, you know, nothing is going right. But we have to, and that's what we ask for. You're not here to give a cherry picture on everything, but just to give balance. We'll be right back. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Ed Fields here along with Rogan Smith. And so anyway, balance is always the key. So what else is happening? I see where the shanty town thing.
Yeah, the shanty towns are coming down. People are very upset. Some people are very upset. You know, they feel as if it's a form of ethnic cleansing. I think we've allowed these shanty, and I'm in the middle with this, right?
Uh-huh.
So if you're going to destroy the shanty towns, my first question is, what is the plan for these individuals who are being displaced? I don't know that has been articulated. I may have missed that. But you can't destroy someone's home and then have no plan for what happens to them in the aftermath, right? But at the same time, I think we've had a proliferation of shanty towns for so many years, and they destroyed so many communities, and it's been left unchecked for so long that, you know, allowing this has caused it to reach the levels that it's at right now.
This is the situation with everything in the Bahamas. We allow it to get to a certain point.
Right, it's
okay,
unchecked. Mm-hmm.
Everything that I can tell you that is a problem now, and I can list them: jet ski, beach vending and vendors, traffic infractions, litter, all of these things. Mm-hmm. So a classic example of litter is this: if you go over to Paradise Island or you go to Cable Beach, they're picking up litter. Therefore, you don't see litter. It's a couple of pieces of paper to pick up. But you go into certain communities, nothing's ever picked up, and therefore it just piles up.
Yeah.
And then it becomes a huge effort to get rid of it when it should be addressed every single day, every single moment, right? So that's to this thing with the shanty town. Now I'm going to say something that people are going to just jump all over me about being insensitive. If you have a shanty town situation, first of all, I don't see it as ethnic cleansing. No one is trying to.
I don't see it as ethnic cleansing
either.
either.
I mean, ethnic cleansing is a whole other category of dropping bombs and, it's crazy.
When it was referred to as that, I said, okay, now we're running out here.
What it is if you give a community notice and say, look, first of all, every health code in the country is violated. Mm-hmm. Every building code is violated. Mm-hmm. Every code of code has been violated. Okay? And really, we shouldn't even be in any way supporting people living in those conditions. Mm-hmm. Number two, if you have been given enough notice, and I'm going to make a statement here. If you go to some of these shanty towns, and I've been, during the day there's no one there, because they're working. These are working people. And if you give them ample notice, you've given them notice to try to find suitable accommodation or alternate accommodation. And let me also say something that's not going to be fashionable. Trust me that I think, and this sounds very prejudiced, okay, that a lot of people probably can afford alternate accommodation, but because they're living in that condition that is not unlike the condition where they come from, they're saving their money. Okay, they're not spending a lot of money on housing.
I don't know that I would agree with that.
Well, I'm just telling you, I know it sounds careless. I'm just saying that the, immigrant populations tend to save money to send home. It's like, or let me put it this way. I had at one point a live-in housekeeper. Okay, they were paid a decent wage, but they were not spending any of that money because they lived in a scenario where their housing was taken care of, their food was taken care of, and almost every dime they had, they would send home. And I understand why that's the case as well, okay? But you know what? Soon it has to come to the point where you say, okay, if I'm going to reside in this country, okay, and I want to be integrated into this country, it's not about sending my money home anymore. It's about how do I make a life here? How do I, be involved in the community here?
I don't know. I think that's
it's a generalization.
It sounds good in theory,
right.
But I think I don't know that is exactly the way it ought to be. Here's why I say that. You could say they should be making a life for themselves here. That's correct.
And we have to accommodate that.
But you have to also understand that the individuals who are here, they left their home because it was in such dire straits. And so they know their family members are back home, still stuck in that environment that they managed to escape from. And so I know I love my family. And if I know they're still stuck back there, I'd rather suffer and make sure they're taken care of, because I know my scenario here, even living in a shanty town, is much better than what they're encountering back in Haiti or wherever.
I agree with you 100%. But while you're doing it, live up to code. So I'm not gonna accept that because you want to help your family at home, which I understand the emotional part of that, but it doesn't mean that you can live outside the boundaries of what our society expects. And our society does not expect or should not accept that you're living in substandard conditions that are not up to code, that are not that are health hazard for everyone, not just you, but the whole environment.
I understand that completely, and
Water
I'm in
table
agreement,
issues.
right? I'm in agreement. But we have to also understand that just because people are working doesn't mean that they're making a lot of money.
Oh, I get
you
that.
have a lot of working poor people, so by the time they probably, a lot of them, I'm sure, just simply can't even afford to stay inside of an apartment.
And there's also
costly.
people who won't, and they're also prejudiced in that people won't accept them.
Exactly.
So I understand all of the dilemma that they may be in.
Let me say this too, okay? And this isn't just for Haitians or Jamaicans, for Bahamians. It is difficult for most people
to find affordable housing.
First month, last month, and security. You talk to some Bahamians who are working right now, and you say you have to move tomorrow, or you have 2 months to move. Let's not think that them moving in 2 months mean, they have a world of time.
No.
That's 2 months they have to accumulate money that they may not be making, and so they have to move in 2 months or 3 months and find first, last, and security, and they just can't. They can't amass that money in that short amount of time.
Let me say this to you.
I just want us to think about
I
all
understand
scenarios.
that, but I'm just saying that there are, and I could be wrong. I don't know if they exist in the United States of America, etc. But I would assume that type of community would not be allowed in many places in the U.S. Okay? You're going to immigrate there. You may be living in substandard housing. I'm not saying that all housing is going to be up to code and up to standard, right? But you're not going to be living in substandard housing where there's, raw sewage in the running around. It's just not environmentally and health-wise sound.
I agree. Listen, you won't get any disagreement from me. I don't like shanty towns. I don't like that standard of living at all. All I'm saying is it's not a simple fix. Not a simple solution.
No, I get that.
And you have some people who have landlords who, like you said, they will not rent to someone if they know they're Haitian.
And what has to happen is it's a rough scenario, but guess what? You know what you can't do? I can tell you what you can't do. You can't allow it to continue unchecked.
Agreed.
That's a fact. So
Agreed.
it's like the right sizing of the civil service and all these difficult decisions
Yeah, no, I
that
don't
if we're
disagree
going to advance as a society, they're going to have to be made at some point. And the longer you let them go on, the more difficult they will be to pull back on
You
them.
do not have any disagreement with me at all as it relates
We're in
to
agreement?
getting. Yes, we are in agreement
Okay.
as it relates to getting
You
rid
care
of the
about
shanty
me?
towns. This ain't about you. You always got to make it about you. But
I care about you. It's about you.
I support the government doing it. All I'm saying is, let's consider everything.
No, it's
Gotta be all things
it
considered.
is. I would hope, and I don't know, because I've not been. Unfortunately, this is the sad part about the human dilemma, the human condition.
Mm-hmm.
We don't dig deep enough into it, right? I'm hoping that the authorities that are doing what they're doing have taken the things that we haven't even considered into consideration. Where are these people going to go? How are they going to be accommodated, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sure, for instance, those landlords of those shanty towns, what can they do to improve conditions in those scenarios?
And
Even just building a common bathroom.
A lot of them are Bahamians.
They are Bahamian. They're all Bahamian who own those properties, and they could be at least at the very minimum. If you're going to rent out property, just vacant land, okay, and allow people to just put up all sorts of, hovels, okay, at the very minimum. You could think, well, you know what? At least build a common bathroom.
No, because
but they're not doing anything.
They're not going to, because that requires capital investment. They don't want to invest in any infrastructure.
But they're
They
making
want
money.
to. Yes, they want exactly. They want you take the raw land. I'm providing you with the raw land. You build whatever structure you want, and I get all that money, and I haven't put in any
nothing.
infrastructure.
Right. Well, I mean, I know what you're saying, but they should at the very minimum. Where can you imagine going to somewhere to rent and they tell you they don't have a bathroom?
And you say, sign me up?
Yeah. I mean, so something's got to happen.
The landowner should be penalized heavily for even allowing it.
That's the other thing.
That's what
they
needs
should
to be
be
happening.
heavy fines. The biggest fine they got is, I tell you what the fine is, shutting it down. Because that ain't coming in no more.
No,
That's
but
the
it
fine.
needs to be some other fine so that nobody goes to even go and do that again,
Right. But here's the thing, and we have to get to this mode. The first one that you see, let me give you another example. Everywhere around this town is a damn car sales lot.
Mm-hmm. I'm seeing more of them pop
everywhere
up every
you go
day.
around this town. And I know this sounds cold, and fine. Let it sound cold. Just because you have to make a living doesn't give you a right to circumvent the rules.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Because guess what? Someone else has to go by the rules.
Mm-hmm.
They can't circumvent the rules.
And they got to pay.
Okay? You can't just go on public property, put your name and a number on a car to say you're selling it.
Yeah, but you can. You know why?
Because we allow it.
Because we allow it.
And that's what has to happen. We have to get to
wild,
a cold,
West.
hard, this is going to stop.
Yeah.
It's got to stop. Okay? Because before let me tell you another example, and it was nasty. The first time, and I'm never going to do it again, the first time I ever stopped to that fruit vendor thing on the corner of Chippingham, because I saw some mangoes. Okay? And I love mangoes. I love mangoes. And you know what? They weren't even mangoes. They were mangoes with stickers on it. They ain't no mangoes. They mangoes from somewhere else. Okay? But the place is filthy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Yeah.
And you know what my deepest fear is now? And I hope, because I will rail against it, right? I hope, I wash them mangoes with soap. I wash them with soap. I just hope that I don't see the next one next to it. It has to be stopped, because before you know it, the whole of that public space will be like that. It just can't go on.
But if one is allowed, the other one will come. People just they test the system. Well, if that person's there,
and then the government is equally fault, because they're trying to make a living. Well, you know what?
No.
Create opportunity for them. Create a farmers market. Create
Yeah.
a space where you have a farmers market where they can go to, where people can go to. You just can't stick anything in the old way.
A lot of these places just don't even look hygienic. I'm always concerned when I see some of the places where people buy food from. I go, you can't be serious. Like, the places just look nasty, and they're handling food. Like, are you not afraid of
There's some places that I could shut down tomorrow if
Bacteria?
I said what I had to say, but I wouldn't do that, because I don't want to get into that. But there are places, and you and I know where they are, where tomorrow we could shut the whole kit and caboodle down just by saying certain things on this radio.
I was just talking to one of my colleagues today about a place. Oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
I won't call the place, right?
And by the way, you see what they do in the States,
But
right?
they have food inspectors and the inspectors, and they give grades and all that
But you
sort
see
of
with
stuff.
the TV,
Oh, they go and they bust them.
Yeah, it's Hank Me Hank or whatever.
Help me, Howard.
Help me Howard or whatever.
Hank me
Yeah,
help.
I just came from Rogan's.
Hank me help.
Yeah, I just came from Rogan's
Kitchen.
patty place, and see the roach.
Yeah.
See the kitchen, the pots.
But let me school you real quick. I won't call the type of restaurant, right?
Okay.
I have a cousin who is an exterminator.
Yeah.
And this is a couple of years ago, and he was called into this restaurant right here in New Providence.
Anything to do with shrimp fry?
I'm not answering.
Well, you don't know which one, so you could say
Which
anyone.
one?
Yeah, we don't know which one, but
Shrimp fry?
you could say the type. Was it shrimp fry?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Right. And he said, and I'm gonna try and do it with my mouth, right? He said, as he and his
Inspectors.
co-worker they were going in. They're the exterminators, not the inspectors. So they heard this sound, right? They were outside the door, and it was like like that sound, right?
Mouse action, rat action.
Hold on. He said, "What is that?" You know? He opens the door and finds walls of cockroaches.
There was so many they made the noise.
Yes,
so
many that you could hear the noise, right? And he said, his co-worker said, beep, like I can't say the word, right?
Yeah.
Now this is an exterminator who's grossed out by what he's seeing.
Well, let me ask you a question. These people call it exterminator, right?
Yeah, they
So
call
you
it.
only call it when you get to the wall level?
When he
God
said,
damn, you know
like
what?
how we in here?
Hey?
Walls,
Let me
and
be-
food is being prepared
Yeah, let me be racist now.
in this area.
Let me be racist now, okay? Let me be just be homo folks with it. It's just humor, relax. So, Fing Chow, I think we need an exterminator now. We have a wall of cockroach.
He was so stupid.
No, but where do you wait till you get to the wall?
How do you get to not wall?
Can you just have like a couple of roaches and you
Not
call it exterminator?
wall.
Shouldn't you have a regular
Walls.
exterminator program?
walls? Do something.
You mean
when
like
the
the wallpaper?
exterminator is freaked out by what that exterminator is
Shut
seeing,
that down.
that's shut down time.
Yeah.
Because they see all
He
kinds of
should have
stuff
put
in their
that.
line
He
of
should have
work.
put that on blast.
Jesus.
You got to put it on blast. See, that's the other thing.
No, why should he put it on blast when you said that you know of places that you could shut down
I don't
now?
want to do that now. We'll do that. We could do that.
So
Let's
it's
do
the
that.
same scenario.
Let's do that.
It's the
All right,
same
let's do that.
scenario.
You know what? Let's do that. You want to do that? You want to do that?
We'll do it next
you wish to do-
episode. We'll do
no,
it next episode
we
so
gonna
we can
put
get
base on
together.
blast?
Yeah, we get the list together.
When do we get the protection? I think we should get the protection first.
Ain't no protection.
Okay?
I come with my pictures.
You know, see, I think you can put it on blast, but you got to go anonymous. In this town, unfortunately, you can do it on blast.
I think things will change if you
You
do
put it on blast. You do it anonymous. Put it on
this is
blast.
good, Kendrick.
We're gonna do that, but I don't know how
Really
we do it anonymously because we already blow our cover on that. Okay. But you know that's what you do.
But people
you need
should know
people. You know what
where
people
they're
should do.
eating is
Yeah.
filthy and they ought
guess
not
what?
to
Let me
eat there.
make this recommendation to people in terms of
I say walls.
accountability. Okay. Instead of maligning people, you know, and getting into personalities and all that, get your camera. Everyone get the camera, and you go into a place. And if it's nasty, now look, we live in a tropical environment. Not if one roach is crawling on the floor. That might have been the only roach in the history of this place. Let's
going back to his cave where there's more.
Well, maybe, but I'm just saying when you know what a nasty place is, you can see a place. Like for instance, this is not a nasty place
No,
in here.
it's not.
Okay, so if a fly was in here or a roach,
Even if I saw one roach in here, I've never seen a roach in this studio
No.
from I've been here. So
Right.
that'd be like, how you getting here?
yeah, it's not like let's shut it down. Okay, all right. So let's be reasonable. But if you go to a place, you know what it's walls and the where the kitchen is nasty. You put that on blast, man. Go anonymous.
That sound.
Go anonymous. Yeah, go anonymous.
My God.
Hold people accountable. Hold people accountable. They'll clean it
Why
up.
don't we have the like in the States? I've been in so many restaurants, like right at the entrance of the restaurant. It doesn't matter what they have, like their health code rating, and if it's like 100%, you're like, oh, this place is really clean. And the inspectors do regular checks and surprise.
I understand.
Pop-up
Let me
checks,
tell you
you know?
something. You want me to tell you something? You say I don't report what I know. I understand that there are something like 4 inspectors.
That's inadequate.
Okay.
Let's go sign up with the inspectors.
I actually at one point
I'll
I
do
said
that.
I volunteered
I'd do
to
that.
be an inspector. Like I'll do it voluntarily.
I would do that.
Okay.
I would do that. How do you
Four.
go? See how you go about doing that.
Okay.
So I
We'll
know
call Romy.
5 places I.
Okay. And you know when people know
Romy,
you're coming
yeah.
around,
Mhm.
and you know what? It's no like, well, you know, no, it's
You
not
know
when you know.
nothing. And
You are
and
serving
put it in the
food to
paper.
people.
Mhm.
Okay. This is how it's going to go. We come in, we inspect. We can give you a week, 2 weeks. By the way, you got to be shut down. You know,
I was gonna say, you
have
gotta
different.
shut-
Well, you
you
have
gotta-
different levels. You have different levels. Some people
So that
just
one
like on the spot, you
that
shut
one
down.
with my cousin, that's automatic.
That's
shut
probably
down.
shut down forever. Because I never heard about that
That's still
before.
open, by the
okay?
way.
Yeah, but that have to be shut down forever. You can tell me exactly
I can
where
tell
that is.
y'all.
That's going to be shut down forever. Okay? Now, you go to some place and you say, okay, I came in, I noticed it said you don't have the thing, you don't have that. I tell you what, you got a week.
Mm-hmm.
You got a week. We're going to come back. If you don't do it in a week, we're going to give you another 60, whatever days, but you're going to be shut down while
Yeah.
you're going to do it.
When you lose
now
that
you,
business.
Now you have to know ahead of time. See how this is how we're going to work. Because Rogan and I are going to be inspectors. When we come and we tell you have a week, you know if you don't get that action done in a week, the next move can be
And I
2
wait.
weeks suspended. And when you shut down for 2 weeks, everyone know you're nasty.
Yeah.
See, the first week everyone know you're nasty. When you go down for the 2 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
they down for they get 2 weeks. Oh Lord, that's one of the 2 weeks things.
Mm-hmm.
They're nasty. Okay, so you have the week to get clean up, get it together,
Mm.
and then after the 2 weeks,
That's a wrap.
that's an announcement. You get that slip in your hey,
That
slap
sound.
it on the door. Shut down by Rogan and Ed Health Inspectors.
I down with that. I'm
as
gonna
soon as
volunteer.
they see you coming, they
I
start
don't think,
cleaning,
I don't think we
mopping.
can just volunteer though.
No,
eh?
we mopping now.
Testing everything. My
Yeah.
people gotta
we
be
should
selective.
but we should have a volunteer thing.
I don't think that they allow. I think you got to be trained and all that stuff. But I don't know
How
why I
hard
didn't
is
be
it to
trained.
train?
I don't know why I got to
If
train
you
to
see
know.
some
I see
stool
the
on the ground. You need to be trained for that. We'll be right back. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Ed Fields here, along with Rogan Smith. Oh, and I wasn't even checking for the fact that you were ignoring me. I was just exasperated in general. Okay, I wasn't even checking for the. I saw you could
No,
did a quick move.
that's because the music was playing, so I
You're
came
stammering
back.
now. You're stammering.
The music was playing, so I put it down now.
Yeah. I saw the quick move. You catch me? No. Yeah. Okay. No, I wasn't even dealing with that. I was just sighing, just having survived you. You're like a thing, you know, like a hurricane. I survived Rogan Smith for 4 years. Okay. Anyway,
So silly.
It's okay. I love hurricanes. Our guest this afternoon is Dr. Nicola.
Is it
For a
Nicola?
dual role.
Nicola.
Nicola?
Exactly.
Just pretend I'm from a different country and that's how we speak. Okay? But you know what? I always mix up the following: Nicole, Nicola, and Nicola. Nicola, Nicola, Nicole. I always forget if someone is Nicole.
Yes.
Like they're Nicola, but then I'll say Nicole. You know, I just think everyone should be Nicole. You're now Nicole. Okay, it makes it easy for me.
Rename this woman.
Nicola,
Give me the Nicola.
Nicola, Virgil, Roll. Okay. How are you doing, Dr. Roll?
I'm well.
That's easy to do.
Nikki works as well. I'm good.
And Kemi is coming. I forget Kemi's last
Kemi
name.
Jones.
Kemi Jones. Kemi's on his way. Is he often late, Dr. Roll?
No. He's just trying to find his way into this fortress.
Yeah. So, and again, I'm going to try to guess this to get this right. You are the director of the Sustainable. No, let me just say it.
Economic Development Planning Unit at the Office of the Prime Minister. And we work on projects like Sustainable Nassau.
Yeah,
we
there
work
you
on the
go.
National Development Plan.
Yeah.
And then we have our new project,
Can I
8
see
months
that?
new, the Over the Hill Community Development Partnership Initiative.
Y'all have a logo and all.
Hold it up. Let's see. Oh yeah, that's nice.
One thing, we good on logos and programs, you know.
Well, we
know.
gotta have our program.
Now, let me ask. Before we get into it, I just want to see if I'm assuming it right. I love to see progress, but I saw where there's a fencing on the Market Street parking lot side. Is that for staging?
No. There's,
what is that for?
I'm not sure, but there's some other work going on there. But we are working, going to start
Because that's
work
my
just across
parking
the
lot. That's
street.
my depot. I hope they ain't trying to take that.
We have some work to begin on Southern Recreation Grounds.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Within the summer on the whole renovation, rejuvenation of that historic park there, and so that's something that's
Yeah.
going to come in the area fairly
What are you
soon.
doing? You look like you're fixing yourself. You all right?
Hey, Justin.
Okay. But no, we're gonna get deep into that. But the whole thing is that we are you and your team, amongst others. Really, it's about the transformation of New Providence.
Yes.
And I don't say just Nassau, New Providence. You think we're going to start calling New Providence New Providence? You think that's going to become fashionable?
Yeah, New Providence. I'd love to see it on T-shirts, and really just branding New Providence.
You don't see it.
Fancy place, We see Toronto. We see, people wearing New York.
Yep.
Let's do New Providence.
The most you see is NP. You don't see. I think that's a big thing. I think people will begin to really exhibit more pride.
Yeah.
If New Providence is I don't know. We just say the thing Nassau, but the whole thing is about transformation. And I think one of the things that Bahamians have felt, Dr. Roll, is that this type of thing seems unreachable. Okay? We were talking, you may have heard us on the air, about how we've allowed things to deteriorate and to denigrate to such an extent that we often feel a degree of hopelessness. What's your perspective on the possibilities?
Oh, we live in a place which, we may think is so far gone, but really it isn't. And so things have gone farther, I think, than what we're used to, certainly in our lifetimes and in my lifetime. But these are issues that are entirely solvable. And what the specialists, the urban planners, and everyone who works with us, all of those specialists in these areas see is so much of the potential. And so they see, for example, in Over the Hill, which actually has space. They say New Providence is actually very, spacious in terms of there's still green spaces and places to reconstruct and to build versus other cities where there is no more space left.
Block, yeah.
Right? And so that's a plus we've got going for us. Then we have a small size. So we're talking about, for New Providence itself, less than 200,000 people or so, 200 something thousand people who make up New Providence. And so it's a very manageable situation. You're talking about the economic base of a country as well. So there's assets that can be utilized. There are within, for example, the Over the Hill area, we see anchor institutions in the University of the Bahamas, in many of the major businesses that are there with the parks and the assets. In New Providence alone, do you realize we have I think we counted 97 parks?
I know, because at one point we were involved in refurbishing a lot of parks, and I actually not only counted them and drove them.
Yes.
They're all over the place.
Yeah.
And that doesn't even include, by the way, Dr. Roll, and I'll put this in your head, the places that were allocated for parks in private subdivisions.
Exactly. So
You didn't know about that one, huh?
No.
Yeah,
So
see?
we've been
Better go
going
add
to
that one in.
the parks for beaches, so our team went through and did 97 parks, did site surveys with the Beaches and Parks Authority to understand some of the challenges. As we were doing the Over the Hill work, we just extended it to all of the parks in New Providence to really understand the assets we have. We have community centers that are amazing.
We just don't treat them like that.
That need programming,
Right. I want to speak to you about the possibilities, because what you and I and Kemi, we've obviously been crossing hairs with working on various things, is actually that when you start taking spaces like Southland Recreation Ground, like Fort Charlotte, like Victoria Gardens, like the fact that the U.S. Embassy is going to be building their embassy on Shirley Street. These are big spaces. The fort, the post office, where there's talk about relocating, possibility, Parliament. These are huge spaces, and so when you start taking those spaces, now all of a sudden you realize how much dramatic change you can have.
Yeah. And it's about focused transformation and focused investment into spaces to upgrade them, to provide and to do it in a smart and efficient manner as well. You know, when older cities are built, it's willy-nilly. You know, it's using the techniques that were available at the time. But as you still keeping the ambiance of a city, but then renovating buildings, retrofitting buildings to make them as efficient as possible, you'll find that you can take that space and make so much more of it. Integrating parking into the space, integrating solar technology, integrating things like green roofs, so that you are having carbon neutral spaces. You can do so much with techniques where you can, and this is all affordable things one can do, but make efficient spaces.
Let's talk about Over the Hill. I think that when people think of urban plight, they tend to think of Over the Hill, okay? I don't think you think about, say, anything, say, south of Robinson Road as being necessarily urban plight. Obviously, there's a lot of, what do you call it, dense residential, but it's not what we would consider urban plight. And really, that area is not that massive. I mean, it's bounded by Nassau Street on one side. Right. And up to, say, I guess Collins Avenue, and then you skip over, and then you have some segments like Kemp Road and but those are manageable areas. And like you said, there's a lot of space, and there's a lot of abandoned spaces. Is that not correct?
Yeah, you're seeing spaces where, you know, from the history of our historical areas, as we've become more affluent or for various reasons, you know, areas that have become more in fashion, we left those areas. We left the houses. We rented those houses. Of course, some of us stayed behind and stayed there and made the best of the space. But, you know, we branched out, and that's how New Providence really grew. So it was very interesting in one of our Sustainable Nassau projects. We took maps of settlements from the 1800s to today, basically, and just saw the urban sprawl. It was massive growth in the 60s and 70s and moved out into so many different areas. And so you're seeing these big footprints of areas for generally a very small population, and it's not as dense as many cities.
That's right. Well, I recall my wife telling me how when they moved to Harold Road, they were the only house.
Nothing beyond that.
They were the only house, and they had no electricity, no telephone, no nothing running. It was a track road to get up to there. Right. And that's in the 70s, you know, 60s, 70s. That's not that long ago. I want to talk to you, well, just to talk about, and I don't know if people see this when they drive through Over the Hill. A classic road for me is like Hay Street. Yeah. Okay? You drive through Hay Street, and I think we drive through with this kind of, this thing. We just want to get from Blue Hill Road or Market Street to East Street. But there are some substantial old homes through that road.
It's beautiful, yeah.
And so and we want to talk about your plan, but what is being done to, and I don't want to use this word because it's not what I mean at all, but to reintroduce, say, middle class, first home type scenarios where people can say, you know what, let me take that home, that's beautiful home, refurbish it, etc., and that's where I want to live. What will it take to get to that point?
Well, we have a couple of things in the Over the Hill project. And so the issue, first of all, of affordable housing is very important to the work, because we know that we have a lot of dilapidated spaces and homes that both need to be fixed up, but in some cases you just need to have new housing in place in order to house the people who are there, and also to fortify against the issues of people feeling as if they've been pushed out, so that there's always a stock of good quality affordable housing. But secondly, in the economic development pillar, the economic empowerment pillar of our work, and we have 6 pillars, we're looking at ways to ensure that there is customs relief for rejuvenating your home, for renovations, and for construction. And so what the proposal in the white paper, which was released a few weeks ago, is that there is relief from customs duties, there's relief from stamp duties subsidies as well. There's also, business tax relief to spur businesses. But you can construct and get all of that equipment and get all of the tools necessary to construct your home, the tiles, the plywood, those types of things that you need to fix that structure in now through the project when it's approved in legislation, duty free. And that's a major component which we're looking at in order to have people be empowered to fix up homes. And so it's a two-pronged approach. So fixing existing homes, making them into much more livable spaces, but then also making sure that you can construct as well good quality affordable housing that meets basic requirements that are necessary for life, and then also that are well managed as well.
But what plan is in place to ensure that there's not abuse of those tax breaks and those concessions? Because with anything like the project like this, I can imagine people taking advantage of it. Yeah. So what's the plan for that?
So we're working with Ministry of Finance and Inland Revenue in particular to make sure that there's a robust regime around the management of any concessions. So the way it's envisioned that it will work, and Finance has been looking at this because there's several other duty-free exemption schemes that are out there. But we're looking to introduce in some way some type of electronic card. So you will go to the Ministry of Finance, one of its offices, and you will apply to participate in a program. Mm-hmm. You will then meet a quantity surveyor, for example, who says, okay, well, with this project and what you're describing here, you need X amount of equipment, X amount of materials, and that's loaded up onto a card. And so you can use that to bring in your things duty-free at the border, so that's your import, or what we are looking to do as well, and this came up at our very first, you can go locally, and it will deduct and say, okay, well, Rogan has used now 100 sheets of plywood, we've now drawn down on that, and so we're looking to do something like that so that you can monitor that, and it will also help the vendors in terms of looking at making sure that they keep their accounting very well, all of those issues. So we're working with Ministry of Finance, and Kemi's been working very closely with them to make sure that there's a robust regime in place around preventing fraud and making it easy to use.
Let's take a break. We'll come right back. We'll talk about that. Yeah. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Ed Fields here along with Rogan Smith. Our guests are Kemi Jones from the Office of the Prime Minister. But what's the other thing you got going on?
Well, we're here tonight talking about the Over the Hill Community Development Partnership Initiative Project.
And we have Dr. Nicola. The wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable. Okay. Nicola Virgil Roll, who is the director of
Economic Development and Planning.
Yeah, there you go. ED&P. Okay, so they're here talking about the whole range of we're going to have you back a million times because it's such a vast thing. But we'll focus now on this Over the Hill project. Mm-hmm. And we were just talking about, Rogan brought up a thing about the duty-free concessions, etc. And how do you prevent fraud? Yeah. Because you know how we roll. Mm-hmm. Okay? I built in three duplex at Carmichael. Mm-hmm. Okay? Mm-hmm. So I applied for that. Kemi?
Yeah. Well, I mean, as Dr. Roll was mentioning just now, before we went to break, the process we're designing right now is, nothing is 100% foolproof.
Right.
But as policymakers, our job is to make it as sound as possible, to prevent leakage and to make sure the persons who need the benefit get the benefit. Mm-hmm. So the structure we're looking at now is, when you come to apply for these tax concessions, you have a quantity surveyor who will look at the construction project you have in mind. They will see the materials you want or that you say you need for that and verify if that's true and fair. Mm-hmm. At the end of the process, you also have that subsequent inspection again to see that the materials you requested and you received have actually gone towards the project you said. That you didn't take half of the materials and, build a complex out Cable Beach with it. Right.
Mm-hmm. Duty free. Well, okay. Well, listen, I want to talk about, that's the ideal. So we all believe, all of us have come from over the hill at some point. Mm-hmm. Not Rogan Smith. I don't know where she's from. Yeah, where? Auckland. Yeah, probably. And they rejected you, so. The reality is, like I said, we're all from over the hill. We all have roots over the hill. There was no other place. That's where it was. And so we all have a kind of a charmed or a romantic view of wanting to go back and to see that area rejuvenated. But let's face it, it suffers some problems. Okay, it suffers from plight, physical and optical plight. It suffers from crime, and it suffers from social issues that don't make it necessarily a place that a lot of people would say, you know what, let me sign up for that.
Yeah.
How do we because we could. It's like you've been involved in neighborhood cleanups and all this, but you go back a month later and it's back to where it is. How do we redo that?
You've got to attack all of those issues. So this program is designed to address all of these types of things. So we begin with the social.
That's one of the pillars?
So one of the pillars, social empowerment. And we know that in order to address challenges in any community, we have to look at what makes you confident as a human being, what makes you employable, which makes you able to keep jobs, all of the aspects of social development we had to address. And so this project has in it elements of that as well, a very important part of it, and that's our first pillar. And then we have to make you economically stable as well. But you need the social side of it in order to benefit from the economic side of it. But you have to look at things like the empowerment zone. So we're going to establish through this program the first empowerment zone for New Providence, where it has that suite of tax concessions and just allowing you to think through and help a business person process their business license or what all the different types of aspects that they need to do to think through. So there's no wrong door. You'll be having centers put there so that it can help you through your daily processes, right down to even just your driver's license.
But how do we, I'm going to be the Debbie Downer or the Dan Downer, okay, or whatever you want to call it for the second. You have a guy, he's 19 years old. He didn't really get the greatest education. He's maybe been through the system, okay? You put beautiful parks there. You put some nice housing there. But he now feels even more perhaps alienated because he doesn't have the capacity to join in, so to speak. How do we take him, multiplied by several thousand, and get him in the process?
So you look at things like job training. That's a key aspect, which is in the social empowerment stage of this. And right now we have a number of different job training, apprenticeship training, types of activities happening. And what this project allows us to do, from a very of a place of being one of the key priorities of the Prime Minister, is to say all of these different dispersed projects that are happening now. Let's look at you and let's see how we can work for this one specific area. And let's focus in on that. Yes, you have other things you're doing as well, and that's very important. But we want to focus in and harness our activity on one particular area. So we're working with programs like the new apprenticeship program out of the Ministry of Labor. That's an IDB-sponsored program that's coming underway that we see as an excellent opportunity. We're going to work with programs like the Citizen Justice and Security Program, something that a loan that's been done for the whole of the Bahamas, but we know that there's some special centers in the Bahamas, in New Providence, in the Quaco Street area, for example, in Big Pond, that we know we can focus some activities and use some of that funding to really benefit our zone.
So will you also do this? I remember one time I lived in this neighborhood in the U.S. and some people were doing renovations.
Yes.
And basically, I lived in the house next door and I worked on that house. So will you, I can imagine you could have a scenario where, let's just say there's a lot of construction going on Quaco Street. You use that as can the young men who live in Quaco Street be working on that house?
Well, see, Ed, you hit the nail right on the head. For example, earlier this year, we had a massive cleanup effort in the Overdale community. And, one of the things we focused on when we engaged in that exercise is to recruit and hire the persons in the community, the at-risk youth, for example, the ones who would be ordinarily selling drugs on the block. Those are the ones we engage, and we actually hired over 150 persons from the area. And the idea is not to just give them that one-time handout, but we also partnered with Beaches and Parks and Ministry of Environment to engage in skills capacity building with them, to show them how you can get a business license, how you can make this into a profitable exercise, and give them a sense of hope. They may not be, the smartest in terms of book smarts, but they have skills and they have value to offer.
And it's interesting because you bring up this selling of dope, and what people don't realize in that mix is what are those people doing? They are trying to earn, and I'm not trying to justify anything, but that's their economic vehicle.
Right.
That's how they, that's how they survive.
Right.
And so how do you replace that?
And you look at the basic skills, and things that we think of as nuisances are also. So we look at the informal car garages. We love to call them bush mechanics.
I've never heard of calling informal car garages before.
So
IFGs.
Well, that's what they are. I mean,
so and it's a nuisance. Many are unregulated. Many are breaching in for example, business licenses that they may have if they have them, and health hazards. There are a number of things there. We also see the importance of striving entrepreneurs as well, and the need for a regulated space for these entrepreneurs to conduct their business. These are people with vocations, with training, and to get more training to be able to generate more income from themselves and their families, and it just needs to be in a more regulated space. And so we see us taking that issue, that health hazard, that challenge, and changing and transforming that. So you'll see there's strategies in this plan that deals with things like that, where we want to target not just with a stick and say, move out of the area, but we want to target it also with a carrot to say, how can we develop a full strategy around integrating you into and formalizing you as well, and giving you and ensuring that you have a space you can work and be productive in, but in a proper place that's regulated.
It's going to require, from my estimation, a great deal of leadership. Because I heard someone say, and I don't remember who it was, although I think I do, they were in the Southern Recreation Ground, for instance, okay, which will be transformed. That there are some people who are saying, like, hey, what you trying to do to my thing here? Okay, what you mean you got to close it at 12 o'clock at night, or what you have to do at certain times? As of course, the majority of the population, I assume, will say, hey, bring it on. The fact that 3 or 4 guys don't want to hang out here at night is irrelevant. But how do you get that buy-in from those 3 or 4 guys?
I mean, you look at you show people the benefits, you show people the difference. In general, people who are well-meaning want a good, clean environment. They want a good, safe environment, and they want to see their communities flourish. Incidentally, those are our 3 mandates from the Prime Minister.
Flourishing?
Yes, communities that flourish, a safe environment, and a clean environment. Yeah. And you'll see people's well-being.
It changes,
their mental state, their way they think about themselves. It changes when you're placed in those environments. And we see oases all throughout over the hill. The Willard Patton School, who are one of our first schools that we worked with, we did tablet distribution to that school, thanks largely to the private sector and civil society who worked with Ministry of Education to do that. But that's a place of beautiful gardens. It's like a hidden garden at the Willard Patton School.
Well, see, that's the thing about the holistic thing, right? That. So you're going to let's say you create these green spaces. Let's say you create these oases. Then obviously the key is the maintenance.
Yeah.
The maintenance. That's what we say. The maintenance of them, and that would involve people from that community. Yeah. So that now they become protective of that environment, right? And once those environments are maintained, that's the standard that people want. They can see the difference between a place with a heap of bottles and a place that has nice grass and some swings, et cetera, et cetera.
And it shows, you care about them. It shows that, and that causes this self-confidence, that causes this ownership mindset. It causes a whole lot of things. And, as we do our work, and we do base a lot of this on the Sustainable Development Goals, which were integrated into the National Development Plan, and we plan to showcase this work, the Over the Hill Project, at our upcoming session that we are presenting at the UN this year in July. And so the Bahamas will present this project.
Can Rogan and I go?
Of course.
Of course.
Actually, for civil society is invited. And so the Bahamas will showcase this work as one of the an integrated project about how we think about sustainable development, and also the concept of leaving no one behind.
Yeah. What's interesting?
And that's important.
What's interesting? I want to talk to Rogan about something. Rogan and I at the beginning of the show was reading a letter that Athena Damianis wrote about, the gloom and doom people, right? It's interesting to me that, first of all, one of the questions I was going to ask is why have we waited so long, right? And then now that something is actually being done, which is instead of 0. I don't know if 10 is the ultimate, but let's say you're doing 5. Why do you think there's like negativity about it? I mean, isn't it a desirable objective to get to where you want to empower people and you know what I'm saying, Rogan?
I do understand.
Yeah. I mean, and I think we tend to have that, and certainly in the last, I think, decade after the 2008 financial crisis and things hurt the Bahamas. I think, we lost some confidence. We lost in terms of we can do these things, and we got to build that back up, and it's important to keep that hope in terms of we can change certain circumstances, and this is entirely doable. We've been allocated, when we say at least $5 million. We know that the private sector is very generous and want to help out. We know that the people themselves want to. That's
a sly solicitation.
We know that people themselves in the community are active and willing participants in this project. Civil society in the Bahamas is active and ready. And so, you have a government as well who is saying, let's put in place the environment where we can get this thing done. And let's put the focus on a particular area for a moment, and then as we get this right, we move on to other areas, and let's try and see what we can do.
Let me ask you. I'm sorry, you go make the point.
Well, yeah, and actually to add to what Dr. Rule said, and back to your point as well, Ed, while we were doing the work for this project to design this program, what you said is exactly what certain persons have said. We've seen this before. We've heard this before. Persons parachuted into the area. They start something, then leave.
Yeah.
And, that's exactly the opposite approach we've taken to this. We've started off engaging, the government, civil society, the churches, and with everything we're doing, we have the community at the center, having them as the one driving this forward. So what you see in this white paper is not us coming in and telling you what to do. It's them designing the programs around what they need to thrive. So a total different approach to not just get by, but also to make it sustainable. Because, at the end of the day, it's not my job to come in and rebuild your community. But it's my job to assist you and empowering you to rebuild your own community. And that's the approach we're taking.
How do you deal with the gentrification that's going to come as a result of this development or redevelopment of the area?
So, it's about, and that was one of the project risks we identified from the very beginning. Our first documents that were released to the press on this, we wanted to deal with the key issues of fraud, of abuse, of complaints of bias, and then we had gentrification as well as a key issue. And so with gentrification, from our work we've seen, the issue is people now, in terms of not being able to afford the area anymore, and feeling pushed out. So we have a slightly different dynamics in the Over the Hill area. So many people live in homes that they technically own. We say that because there's still some title disputes or title and disparity, right? But it was Grammy's house, and I've been living in it for 30 years. And so one of the actions that we want to do as part of this work is help to deal with the title issues. And so there's a number of pieces of legislation that need to come into place to help to deal with those types of issues. And there was an IDB project some time ago that worked on that, and we want to see that resurrected to be able to look to deal with issues of title, so that you now you're not just house rich, but you also have that title as well.
And I would think that there should be some very easy qualifiers, like if you have been living in the house for 30 years, you've been maintaining the house for 30 years, whoever's making claim hasn't been making any contribution. I would think those are the kind of...
Those are some legal issues we have to address. But the single biggest thing that we saw is, first of all, developing the policy with that as a key risk in mind. And so that everything you do, you look at it from that lens. Am I hurting the people who I intend to help?
Right.
Am I, causing people to be pushed out? Or if I'm seeing this, how do I course correct right up front? And so keeping a monitoring in place for that. And then the other thing that we've seen is that...
Before you go off the gentrification thing, isn't it important, though... Well, no, explain to me and to us the difference where someone is, say, renting a home, right? And they own the property. but as a result of the efforts that you're making, that they're able to fix up that property
Exactly.
and stay in that property, and that property just gains more value.
Right.
And then they're able to now, if they do feel the need to relocate or whatever, at least they have an asset that they can benefit from. But what is the percentage of people? Because I think Over the Hill, as we knew it, has changed dramatically.
Right.
I think there's a heavy immigrant population.
Yes.
I think there's a heavy renting population. I don't think there's a huge population of people who are owner occupiers, are there?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good percentage. We have the numbers.
The data is roughly about 50-50 in terms of those
50-50.
who say they own and
Okay.
those who rent. And of course,
Okay.
like Dr. Rose said, in many cases, when the surveys were done and they said that they own it, it could be that they were living there because it's Grammy's house, so they feel
Okay.
entitled. But that's roughly the split we're working
Yeah,
with. here.
and those Baintown was 45%, Centerville 52%, Grandstown 50% in a survey that was done for the Citizens Justice and Security
All right.
Program. So there are, and then there were renters, and then there were just these.
Well,
but
we'll be right back. We're going to
yeah.
take a break, but I'll tell you one thing before we go to the break, and we can talk about this. It seems to me that for the first time in my recollection, these youngsters are young. It seems that this is the first time that a lot of focus is being given to the weakest amongst us. And that in itself is it's a huge undertaking, but it seems certainly admirable. We'll be right back. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're here with Kemi Jones from the Office of the Prime Minister and Dr. Nicola Virgil Rolle from who's the Director of Economic Development and Planning. I got it right.
Yes.
And we're talking about the Over the Hill project. I think it is. There must be two camps here. And I'm going to say that there are camps of people who don't really feel touched by this. In other words, they're not from Over the Hill. They don't live over the hill. They don't have the association. Whereas I would like to find out from you, for the people who you've been dealing with and communicating with and conversing with from Over the Hill, who are living in Over the Hill, how are they feeling about this?
Oh.
Well, and I'll say, just starting off with the cleanup campaign, I can tell you, when we started doing this work, going around in the community to get support and with the civil society groups, even talking to the residents, the one comment we got from everybody is that they felt empowered. They hadn't seen a significant effort of this magnitude forever, in terms of the all-out effort to help with the cleanup, to help in terms of bringing job skills to the Over the Hill community, just a full-fledged strategy to empower them.
See, the funny thing, and this is what Nicola can tell you. I'm kind of over the top when it comes to cleanliness, when environmental cleanliness. When you look at New Providence, and you look at it geographically, essentially the outskirts are okay. We got a lot of work to do in some places, but it's okay. I mean, there's a lot of dumping, there's a lot of stuff. But the plight is Over the Hill. Yeah. And it seems to me that it's not that huge of a job to get it done and to maintain it, as opposed to, well, you have to have the desire and the will and the focus. And is that what we're seeing now?
Yeah, and I think it's also the understanding that we had to drill down into the causes. And so there are a number of things, a number of dynamics when you look at economically challenged areas. So, being economically depressed areas, as many in Over the Hill, you may have situations where you're looking at buying used things. So the lifespan of an item is, and especially those bulky items,
like a car,
much shorter.
A used
stove,
car, a refrigerator,
a fridge,
stove, yeah.
A microwave, those things that all of us take for granted and last, if in its new state, last many, many years, they're going to last shorter. So you've got to dispose of that, and you may not have income to dispose of that, so you pile it in the back of the yard. Then you're looking at more dense households. And so as we did the survey works, so we talked to the Department of Environmental Health. We went and spoke with the truckers who are part of the, who actually now take pick up the garbage. And so there's a standard for New Providence of once per week pickup. Regardless, and so you get a certain amount of homes, but these homes in the over the hill area are denser, so they have more people. So you're generating a lot more trash, right? If a home in those nicer middle class areas are 3 people, a home in some areas are 9 people, and so you're generating more trash per household, and but you still got the same amount of households to pick up. So you've got to look at that. Then you may have lack of enforcement around, for example, apartment buildings that are required to have private pickup, and then they don't. And so what do you do then? Do you just leave that trash, or do you try to accommodate that in some way?
Well, let's look at the ROI on that, right? So in an area like Grantstown, where people are, say, going to dispose of refrigerators and stove more often, okay? First of all, I think we always let it get out of hand, okay? But let's suppose we were to the point where every piece of trash over the hill was picked up, everyone had their stove in the house, and let's say tomorrow the first stove has to be thrown away. Wouldn't it be worthwhile for the government to have a program to collect that?
Exactly.
Because the return on the investment of not being garbage accumulation is going to far outweigh the cost of picking it up.
Yeah, and so that's by looking at it very scientifically, data-driven. That's why we designed a program that deals with, first of all, trying to increase the frequency of garbage pickups in this area. That's one of our pilot projects we hope to launch with the new budget year. Secondly, we want to make sure that we have periodic bulk waste collection. So there'll be points where you can take this thing and dump it. And then also with that comes enforcement as well. Yeah. So beefing up the Department of Environmental Health ability to enforce for infractions. But you've got to put in place the systems where it gives you every opportunity to do the right thing. And we know that there are also other areas. So many truckers, for example, sometimes you're going to take it to the dump site. You're going to tip it right there. Yeah. And so there are many different reasons why. And so we said, let's look to the root causes and let's ask those questions. What are the root causes why this community isn't as clean as it could be? And then deal with these things individually. And so we've designed a program with the community that deals with these root causes, and then we'll see how we nudge behavior.
Well, let's talk about enforcement, right? Because we tend to be enablers, right? Oh, well, they can't. Yeah. If you, for instance, create an area on a block or street that says, okay, this is the area to take your refrigerator or your bulk waste, then, the reality is someone's got a friend with a truck or something. You could get into that lot, okay? Yeah. As even I hate to say it, even if 4 people got to walk with the small little fridge to get into that lot, as opposed to you just dump it in front of your yard. And now you have to say to that person, you know what? We're going to make provision to move this, but if you dump that in front of the yard, there's a penalty to pay for that.
When we were doing the cleanup exercise, Ed, one of the key things that came up a lot from the residents in the area, because the sustainability aspect kept coming up and enforcement as well. One of the key things that persons kept saying is that it isn't us dumping. People from elsewhere are coming here and dumping on these vacant lots. So that's where the enforcement comes into play. That's where the need for increased surveillance, for more CCTVs comes into play, and the need to support the residents on the ground who are trying.
It's multi-pronged. That's the problem.
Enforcement is important. You can't, the CCTV monitoring. We're looking to employ that. You're going to have your hotspot dump sites. We know where they are, and in order to monitor those sites and see what's really happening, and then go after with the penalties that are in the law, dumpers and other people who violate these things. We're posting signs out so people know and are being reminded about dumping throughout these neighborhoods. And as people see a difference and a cleanup exercise. You talked about return on investment. It's a very expensive, activity. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars for a weekend. And we know we've got to go in over and over again in one day. Kemi, how much was that? 6 football fields?
Yes.
6 football fields in one day of refuse.
That's in the first day of the cleanup exercise, yeah.
6 football fields.
Where is this being dumped? Is it in bushy areas or is it just in vacant
Everywhere.
lots?
Bushy areas and houses, and some persons fenced off their lots and people threw the trash over the fence.
Oh my God!
I think about, because one of the things that before we go that I want to kind of meld into this is the role of local government. Because, as you know, Kemi's on that committee, as am I, and other folks. And one of the things, and Nicola, but she's always, she's in the travel club. She's in the travel club. That's all I could say. She knows what I mean. But what I'll say is this. One of the things was being considered, and I think it's very important, is that how the thing is districted is that you will have multi socioeconomic groups in one district. Because let's face it, in my neighborhood, okay, the needs that I have are minute. Okay, now and again we get a pothole, street signs over. I mean, it's minute. Whereas the needs of a more dense populated area with less income is more. I really think that we are onto something when we can say that a district can manage a particular district, and with the combined revenue from the multi-leveled socioeconomic groups, they can focus on how to bring those districts up to speed. Because the return on investment is this. Those folks in those areas that are not as nice now will become nicer, and it becomes just a happier place for everyone. Everyone less angry. They have places to play. They have places to vent their frustrations in terms of sporting activities and community centers. I mean, is that how you see local government integrating into this?
Oh, most definitely. And local problems should be be solved by local people. And what we found, and this project really is a pilot for that, how this could possibly work in terms of the generation of ideas, the generation of solutions coming from within a community, and then being executed with and guided by the community as much as possible. The next logical step then is the handing this over to local people.
Well, that's the question, right?
To fully implement this work.
The question then is, and again, we're not trying to be condescending. This is just a reality. Do you see the talent pool? Because one of the things of local government folks is that you have to live in that district. Do we see the talent pool in that district being prepared and ready to take these responsibilities on?
Yeah, so with local government, and we worked on a local government options paper, and you were on that committee with us for our Sustainable Nassau project. So we're looking at new and innovative approaches to local government to make sure that we have, of course, local representation, and then also, as with any local government throughout the world, there's also the element of professional talent wherever necessary to do certain things that needed. And so we're looking at options that allow us to have those types of things for project management, for city management, but also having the heart and spirit managed by, of course, elected officials who represent the areas that they are coming from. And so, we see with this project that, as I said, this is a pilot for how and what local government could be focused on. So these are issues for a particular zone, a particular region of New Providence that are the most pressing issues for this community. And we know that the same can be replicated in Carmichael, in South Beach, in Blair, in the West, throughout the New Providence, when we think about local government for New Providence and dealing with their specific challenges, and then working with national government as well to make sure that the policy environment exists to help them do what they have to do.
Just to add to that, Ed, my background is more private sector. So for me, I've seen many a person come along, very passionate, a very good idea, but they just didn't have the skills and experience to know how to take that idea and develop it into a product, say, like an Atlantis. But I think the one thing, and I'm keen to see this happen with local government.
I haven't heard the word keen in a long time. Go ahead.
What I'm excited to see, when we look at when the new administration came in, I mean, there was an orientation and training for the new parliamentarians.
Right.
I'm keen to see that similar training happen for new local government officials, persons from the community who have the ideas, but may not have the know-how, the capacity building and training for them to how to run this effectively and execute on your vision.
I tell you, and I don't know if you're realizing this as you speak, and I brought this up to Mr. Henfield the other day when he was here in terms of like the founding father type thing. But what you're also saying, I think, is actual job creation. Because what you're doing now is all of these things require people. It's not going to work without people. So to your extent, to your point, Nicola, when you talk about local government empowerment, well, you know what? There's going to be tons of kids who come back with public administration degrees and urban development degrees and all these things that are now able to. When I was doing public administration in the University of Georgia, right, I said to myself, well, where I can use this? I literally said that to myself. No, I literally said, where am I going to use this, right? I mean, and so I did a little focus on another thing, but the reality is it creates a whole nother range of opportunities. And then what's even more exciting is not only is it creating that governance level of opportunity, but because you're creating these economic zones, now all sorts of ideas are going to flow through without being stunted by, central government, etc. It's very exciting. It's very transformational. I think Rogan's generation, certainly Kemi's generation, well, you and Ken as well, Nicola. I got to tell you, I don't know about me, but my friend over here put me in the past the other day. She said talking in the past tense. But it's very transformational, and it is what is required for the Bahamas really to succeed going forward. You must be very, very excited about what you're doing.
We are.
What are the kind of, if you had to put a timeline, and we asked you this before, by the way, when you came here, timeline and what's the word? Not benchmarks, but points of success. What would you put in the next, say, 2 to 3 years? How would you measure it?
I mean, I think to see a demonstrable difference in terms of the cleanliness of the area. That's a pressing issue for us right now. To get up and running the community centers that are there with programs so that every kid who's in that area who wants and whose parents want them to be involved in something will see attractive programs that they can learn.
Boys and
all of those things. I want to learn, in our Southern Recreation Grounds, I was thinking about what's an inexpensive sport that's an Olympic sport. And it's ping pong.
Yeah.
$5 for a paddle set, and you can imagine these kids learning and going on to something great like that. In addition to track and field and all of our great strengths.
There's a whole range of things.
But so sport is very important in the projects as well. So getting these community centers really working, so you're seeing kids having after school programs, having after school tutoring, all of the things that they need, and then of course dealing with the issue of some targeted crimes in the area. And so you will see in here we focus on gun crime, we focus on anti-gang initiative, we focus on fighting, and fighting and posting on the internet. So those types of things, that we see. So really making a dent in those areas. We deal with child molestation as well. So having programs to identify, to help victims, those types of things. All of those issues came up from the community, and we've put them also in the white paper to say these are the types of program we want to see in our schools and in our community centers and in our churches. And overall, I think just having a very active community. We want to be able to see what are the programs happening in our over the hill zone, and so that people know I can get services from this church, from this community center, from this school after school, and just seeing that all in one place.
We're going to have to run, but one of the things that I'm looking forward to seeing is, and we talked about it in another sphere, and that is as communities start developing, and especially when it starts developing sporting activities, we need to see communities start competing with each other in terms of which community is the best community to be in and to be from. And that's where you get that pride element again. Listen, guys, this is obviously something that is going to be going on for a long time. It's not a stop and go type of deal. It's a stop and continue type of deal, and we hope that as we start and continue, hopefully as we continue, we can have you back on to talk to the folks about what's going on.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.